The dinner rush at Silverstone always felt like an orchestra at its crescendo, crystal glasses chiming, forks clinking against porcelain, velvet-draped walls, swallowing whispered secrets of Manhattan's wealthiest. But tonight, the music felt harsher, as though every sound vibrated with tension. In the middle of that polished chaos, Kesha Johnson stood tall, a tray balanced effortlessly in her steady brown hands, the soft hum of jazz brushing against her ears, like a taunt reminding her she didn't belong in this world of power and privilege. Her midnight black hair was pulled into a neat bun, her uniform pressed with quiet dedication, and her eyes, tired but resilient, reflected the truth only those who've fought for survival know. She was not here because life opened doors for her. She was here because she clawed her way through every locked one, but privilege often hates the sight of perseverance it can't control. Across the polished marble floor, Victoria Pierce, the restaurant's manager, stormed forward like a storm cloud summoned by envy and superiority. Her sharp heels cracked against the Italian tiles like judgment. A woman who loved order, hierarchy, and the silent thrill of power, Victoria wore prejudice like perfume, subtle to those like her, suffocating to those beneath her. And tonight, she had found her target again. The scene unfolded in seconds, yet stretched forever. A plate, expensive hand-painted Chinese porcelain, slipped from Victoria's fingers. It shattered against the floor in a burst of white and cobalt dust. A gasp rippled through the kitchen staff standing nearby, the clatter echoing like a gunshot in the quiet corner where Kesha prepared drinks. But the sound was not an accident. It was the sharp, calculated crack of humiliation, a blade Victoria knew how to wield perfectly. "You can't be serious." Victoria's voice sliced through the air, dripping with disbelief and contempt. She pointed at Kesha as though signaling a stain to be scrubbed away. "A waitress like you serving the Hartwell family's VIP table?" Her tone wasn't confusion, it was accusation. Her warning dressed as outrage. Kesha's pulse kicked hard, but her expression stayed still, stone calm, practiced. Life had trained her well. Being underestimated meant survival. Rising above quietly meant victory. The other waiters, almost all white, all groomed into Silverstone's culture of silent obedience, looked away, unsure whether to pity her or pretend they didn't see the injustice. Power makes cowards of the comfortable. And tonight, Victoria wanted an audience for her theater of dominance. "At your feet," Victoria hissed, glancing at the shattered plate, "is the mess you just made. Or is cleaning floors too lowly now for someone who suddenly thinks she's above her place?" Kesha inhaled deeply, the slow breath of someone who had learned long ago that reacting loudly feeds tyrants. Her hands tightened on her tray, but her voice remained steady, calm in the storm. "With all due respect, Ms. Pierce," she replied softly, "I didn't drop the plate." Which was true. But truth rarely mattered to people who feared the strength in someone rising from places they never had to climb. Victoria smiled. "It wasn't pleasant. It was predatory, thin, sharp, triumphant. Do you think they'll notice? Do you think they'll care who dropped it? Clean it up." Her voice lowered, venom curling around each syllable. "And then get back to the kitchen where you belong. Table 12 is no place for people like you." There it was, the line meant to slice open the wound of history, class, skin tone, and quietly tolerated discrimination. "People like you." A sentence that carried centuries of unspoken chains. Kesha felt a familiar tightness in her chest, not pain, but memory. Flashing images of school administrators looking at her sister with pity, masquerading as concern. Social workers judging before understanding. Employers smiling while expecting less. Doors locked, not with keys, but assumptions. But she lifted her chin. "Actually," she murmured. Voice steady but laced with hidden steel, "Mr. Hartwell requested me personally." A ripple of shock startled the kitchen staff. Victoria blinked, first confusion, then rage flickered across her face. She hadn't expected resistance. Not from her quiet black dishwasher turned part-time waitress. Her nails dug into her clipboard, knuckles paling. "What?" she spat. Kesha didn't flinch. "He called himself. Asked for the waitress who speaks with her hands." For the first time, Victoria's mask cracked, confusion splintering into irritation. She had no clue what that meant. And ignorance, when paired with arrogance, becomes anger. She stepped closer, whispering so only Kesha heard. "You think a lucky trick makes you special. When you ruin the night of the most important family in this city, remember this moment." Kesha met her gaze, eyes clear, almost gentle, but beneath them simmered a quiet, burning knowing. A certainty born from hardship and love. If she survived childhood heartbreak, guardianship at 16, hunger, prejudice, and sleepless nights working 3 jobs, she could face this. She nodded once. "Yes, ma'am," but something unseen pulsed. Behind her gaze, the stillness of someone preparing for battle long before. The enemy even realized a war existed, and as she bent to pick up the shards, tiny splinters reflecting golden restaurant light, they glittered like fragments of the life she was about to leave behind. No one watching knew this moment would become the origin of a downfall, the collapse of an empire of arrogance. But Kesha felt it. A shift in the air, the whisper of destiny sharpening its blade. She gathered the broken pieces gently, calmly. Because sometimes victory begins by humbling yourself in the face of cruelty, only to rise higher than those who tried to break you. And as she stood, spine straight, chin lifted, the silent vow echoed through her heart. "I've survived worse storms than you, and when this breaks, I will still be standing." The orchestra of the restaurant resumed. But the music had changed. A storm was coming, quiet, strategic, unstoppable. And tonight, Victoria Pierce had just chosen the wrong woman to underestimate. The VIP table. The dining hall of Silverstone shimmered beneath golden chandeliers, each light glancing off crystal glassware and polished cutlery like diamonds arranged for a royal feast. Outside the grand floor-to-ceiling windows, Central Park glowed under the velvet dusk, a calm contrast to the storm swirling quietly inside Kesha's chest. She moved forward, tray balanced, breathing slow, every step deliberate, every muscle remembering restraint. She was walking into a battlefield of silk, wealth, and sharp eyes, yet her posture held the grace of someone who had fought far harsher wars in silence. Table 12. The most coveted corner, framed by views and privacy, reserved only for Manhattan's untouchable elite. Tonight, it would host a name whispered with awe among financial circles and media headlines, the Hartwell dynasty, a billion-dollar lineage. Old money royalty in America, but none of that mattered to Kesha in this moment. Only one thing did. She lifted her eyes and prepared to greet the family who unknowingly held the power to alter her life. The Hartwells arrive. 3 figures sat at the table. The first, Ethan Hartwell, mid-30s, sculpted by private schools and boardrooms. His suit cut sharp enough to command respect without raising a voice. His presence felt effortless, as though the world had always moved around him rather than the other way around. Handsome, polished, yet distant, his eyes constantly analyzing, never resting long enough to truly see. Beside him, a blonde woman tapping sharply into her phone, face glowing under the screen light. Her expression cold, bored, irritated at the mere concept of waiting. Wealth didn't bring elegance, it exposed entitlement, and she radiated it like perfume. But Kesha's breath caught when she saw the third figure, an elderly man, posture dignified despite age, silver hair combed neatly back. His suit was soft grey wool, classic and respectful, chosen by someone who once cared deeply for presentation. But what held Kesha was not his appearance. It was his stillness, a silence not of peace, but isolation. The vacant hum in his eyes, the way he tilted his head slightly, not lost, but listening with a different sense. Watching lips that ignored him. He wasn't invisible, he was unseen. Her heart recognized him instantly. Deaf elder in a hearing world, alone in a crowd, forgotten in a family. Photo where everyone smiles except the one left in silence. Kesha's hand tightened on her tray, not with fear, but with understanding deeper than words. Formal introductions. Good evening, she began softly, her voice steady, warm yet respectful. Welcome to Silverstone. My name is Kesha and We need the wine list immediately, the blonde woman interrupted without looking up. Her voice sliced through the air, not malicious but dismissive, the apathy of someone who never learned to consider others, and the appetizers. Quickly, we have a meeting at 10. She didn't say please. She didn't acknowledge her. Kesha simply nodded. Grace, even when faced with arrogance. Of course, Mum, but she didn't move toward the wine list. Instead, she turned to the elderly man, stepped slightly into his line of sight, and smiled gently so he could read her face clearly. Good evening. Sir, she signed fluidly, hands lifting in quiet elegance. It's a pleasure to have you. May I know what you'd like to drink tonight? Time slowed. Forks paused. Conversation died. The elder's stillness broke, like ice thawing beneath spring sunlight. His tired eyes widened, then softened, blooming into something warm and raw. Recognition, gratitude, shock, relief, all at once. His hands trembled, then lifted slowly. You sign. His fingers moved shakily, as though he hadn't had a reason to sign joy in a long time. It's been so long since someone spoke to me, Kesha smiled. And it wasn't a server's smile, it was human, real. Yes, sir. It's an honor. Across the table, Ethan's head jerked up, disbelief cracking through his polished composure. The blonde woman's phone slipped from her fingers, landing on the table with a soft thud. No, one saw this coming. Because people like them rarely see the brilliance of someone they assume is beneath them until the moment it blinds. Then breaking silence with dignity, Kesha continued signing. We have German Riesling, French Chardonnay, and a beautiful reserve white blend. What would you like? The old man laughed, quiet, breathy, astonished. Laughed like someone tasting freedom again. Let's live dangerously, he signed with a spark. Bring the Riesling, she nodded. Immediately, she turned to leave, but Ethan's voice stopped her. How? Did you learn? His tone was not command. It was curiosity, surprise, something softer than earlier. Kesha paused, hands folded professionally. My younger sister was born deaf, she said gently. ASL is my first language, and there it was. The truth, simple and pure, spoken without ego or apology. Her strength not shouted, but revealed like rising dawn. Ethan stared, not at her uniform, not at her skin, but at her. The human being he had overlooked moments earlier. The world shifts as Kesha walked away to fetch the wine. Whispers trailed behind her. Did you see that? She signed, fluent too. That old man. He lit up. Even the walls seemed to breathe differently. And across the room, at the far corner of the bar, Victoria watched, mouth tight, eyes narrowed. Fury coiling like a serpent denied its strike. Kesha wasn't just serving table 12. She was dismantling a hierarchy, brick by silent brick. And for the first time in her life, the restaurant was watching her not with judgment, but wonder. What they didn't yet know. This night would shatter more than porcelain. It would break ceilings, expose cruelty, and build a legacy stronger than privilege could ever buy. Because justice sometimes begins not with shouting, but with quiet hands speaking truth in a world that refuses to listen. His first smile in months. The wine glimmered inside the crystal decanter as Kesha poured, the pale gold liquid catching the chandelier light like sunlight trapped in glass. But the true glow in the room wasn't the wine, it was Arthur Hartwell's eyes. For the first time since he had entered the restaurant, he looked awake, present, alive. His fingers tapped lightly on the table, not to call for attention, but in a rhythm only those fluent in silence could recognize. Excitement, gratitude, connection, little sparks of life returning. Kesha set the wine gently before him, careful and respectful. Her movements were not those of a server, but of someone honoring dignified ground. Then once again facing him fully, so he could see her hands clearly, she signed, "Would you like to try it first, sir?" Arthur chuckled, the sound airy and warm like a forgotten melody rediscovered. His shoulders loosened, years of quiet tension melting away. "Please, let's see if it is as bold as your courage," he signed back, eyes twinkling. The comment caught her off guard. Not flirtatious, appreciative, respectful. Her chest tightened, not in fear, but emotion. That rare kind humans feel when seen by someone who does not look with eyes. But Hart, a grandson, begins to see Ethan. Hartwell watched this exchange with a stillness uncharacteristic of a man raised in movement, deals, and certainty. His world ran on efficiencies, smart decisions, sharp intellect. But this was something his money had never bought: connection without agenda, communication without expectation. The slow, graceful bridge between two people from different worlds, formed not by status but by empathy. "Grandfather," he said quietly. Leaning in, "You seem happy." Arthur turned to him, face bright, fingers signing before the words formed in Ethan's mind. "For the first time in a long time, I feel included." The words hit Ethan like blunt truth. Shame tugged at him. Guilt bloomed. His jaw tightened. How many dinners had he rushed? How many conversations had he failed to slow for? How many quiet pleas from his grandfather had been swallowed by noise? He had never meant harm, but neglect wears the same mask as apathy. Kesha didn't see Ethan's internal storm, but she felt the shift. The emotional temperature at the table was changing, thawing, reshaping. She retrieved the menus, holding one for Arthur, but instead of placing it before him like a decorative item, she signed, "Would you like me to read the menu to you and show the dishes visually?" Arthur's face broke into a beam so radiant even the diners near them paused unconsciously to witness it. Ethan swallowed. He had never, not once, considered offering his grandfather that dignity. The language of respect. Kesha began describing each dish, signing simultaneously, painting every flavor with grace. Fresh salmon with lemon butter, roasted duck with wild herbs, vegetable risotto infused with saffron. Her hands moved like poetry, fluid, rhythmic, full of quiet love. Arthur laughed again, making a joke only she understood. And she laughed too, softly, respectfully, like two old souls sharing a secret. It wasn't the food he was choosing. It was humanity. All around them, waiters paused. Whispers fluttered across the tables like wind across water. "Who is she? Did the manager promote her?" "I've never seen him smile like that." Customers lifted their phones, pretending to check messages, but secretly capturing the moment. The billionaire patriarch lighting up like a child, seeing the ocean for the first time. The grandfather's request after placing the order. Arthur lifted his hands again. His fingers moved slower this time, purposeful. "You remind me of my late wife. Kind, patient, strong." Kesha bit the inside of her cheek to hold back tears. Compliments from strangers meant little when life taught you to expect pity instead of praise, suspicion instead of trust. But from him, from a man who lived in silence and was finally being heard, it felt sacred. Her voice softened, signing with meaning behind each word. "Thank you. That means more than you know." Arthur touched his heart, a gesture universal across all languages. Grace, under watchful eyes, as Kesha walked away, a soft murmur rolled through the restaurant. Staff exchanged glances, some admiring, some curious, one or two resentful that someone like her could shine in a room built to exclude her. At the far corner, Victoria stood stiff as a stone statue carved from bitterness. Her lips were tight, eyes cold, blood simmering with humiliation. She watched not just a waitress succeed, but a woman she believed beneath her command respect, warm hearts, and redefine power without saying a single defiant word aloud. To a tyrant, silent empowerment is the sharpest blade. Victoria's hand curled around the edge of the counter, nails digging into polished wood. She didn't just see Kesha being noticed. She saw her being valued, and for someone like Victoria, who fed on superiority, witnessing dignity granted to someone she tried to crush felt like poison. The quiet turning point as Kesha moved toward the kitchen, her steps light, her face glowing with the echo of Arthur's smile. She didn't yet know this night had shifted everything, not just in the restaurant, not just for her, but in the heart of a powerful family, and in the eyes of a wealthy heir who, for the first time, realized that true wealth wasn't measured in dollars, but in the people one chooses to dignify. Victoria's voice suddenly sliced through the moment. "Kesha, we need to talk," but this chapter didn't end on intimidation. It ended on something far more powerful: hope, quietly rising, because somewhere behind her, an old man's first genuine smile in months still floated in the air, and it belonged to her. The soft applause of crystal glasses and murmuring voices drifted like a velvet fog across Silverstone's dining hall. But behind the polished elegance, tension coiled like a serpent waiting to strike. Kesha stepped through the kitchen doors with the grace of someone floating on a tide of unexpected light. Her heart still carried the warmth of Arthur Hartwell's grateful smile. His silent laughter echoed in her mind like a hymn she never knew she needed. For a fleeting moment, she allowed herself to breathe, to feel that rare taste of dignity being returned to her, not as a favor, but as recognition earned. But light always angers those committed to dark ceilings, and waiting in the shadowed corner near the employee hand-washing station stood Victoria Pierce, arms crossed, jaw clenched, face carved into ice. She didn't need to speak. The air around her already dropped 10 degrees. "Walk with me," she said, voice tight enough to snap if pulled harder. Kesha didn't flinch, didn't shrink. She lifted her chin with quiet resolve and followed her manager down a dim stretch of hallway near the storage rooms, a place Victoria preferred for private humiliation. She liked shadows. They made her cruelty feel bigger. The hidden knife in her smile, Victoria turned sharply, heels stabbing the floor. "Explain yourself." Kesha blinked once. "Ma'am?" "Don't play naive," Victoria snapped. "You made quite the performance out there, signing, smiling, laughing, like this is your stage." Kesha inhaled slowly, steady. "I was assisting a guest, Miss Pierce." Victoria leaned closer, voice acidic with envy and control. "No, you were showing off." Her eyes narrowed, pupils icy, voice dropping to a poisoned whisper. "You embarrassed me." There it was, the wound. Victoria wasn't angry because Kesha succeeded. She was angry because she wasn't the one chosen. And worse, because someone she believed beneath her dared to shine where only she thought she belonged. "You think one rich family's attention can change who you are?" Victoria sneered. "Let me be very clear. You are not special. You are here to carry plates, clean tables, and stay invisible. That is your role. Understand?" The words hit like darts, not because they held truth, but because they echoed every closed door Kesha had faced since childhood. But she didn't break. She didn't fire back. She only straightened, every fiber of her spine, remembering the night she rocked her deaf little sister to sleep after both parents died. Strength shaped in silence is stronger than strength shaped in noise. "Yes, Ma'am," she said calmly, dignity resting on each syllable. The threat beneath Silk Victoria's lips twitched in annoyance at Kesha's composure. She wanted a reaction. Tears, defiance, anything to justify crushing her harder. Instead, she was met with still water, unbreakable. "You listen to me carefully," Victoria whispered sharply, stepping close enough that the scent of expensive perfume turned sour. "You will finish serving that table tonight, then you are back in the kitchen. No exceptions, no arguments." Kesha remained still. "And if you ever try to go beyond your station again, I will make sure you never work in another high-end establishment in this city. You and your little hearing-impaired sister will be—" The word stopped mid-sentence, choked by something unexpected, because behind them, footsteps approached. Unseen, witness Ethan Hartwell stood at the end of the hallway, face unreadable, posture still. He hadn't heard everything, but he'd heard enough. The closing line lingered like smoke, "Your little hearing-impaired sister." He glanced at Kesha. She quickly lowered her eyes, heart pounding, knowing the danger, not of him judging her, but of him hearing just enough to ask questions she couldn't afford to answer. Victoria turned, startled. Her mask slammed back into place. Plastic smile, polished voice, brittle sweetness. "Mr. Hartwell," she exclaimed. "We were just discussing staff training standards, making sure service remains excellent." Ethan didn't acknowledge the excuse. His gaze rested on Kesha. "Everything okay?" he asked, tone deceptively gentle. "A test, a lifeline, a warning." All in one sentence. Kesha nodded once. "Yes, sir. Everything is fine, because sometimes survival means choosing the battle, and this was not the moment. Not yet, not here where Victoria still held the title, even if she'd lost the moral ground." Ethan's eyes lingered longer than expected, registering something unsaid, some truth hovering between fear and steel in Kesha's expression. He didn't push. Instead, he simply said, "I'd like to request you remain our server tonight." A quiet command. An immediate shift in power. Victoria stiffened. "Of course, sir," she forced out. Ethan nodded and left. Victoria's jaw twitched with barely contained rage, but for the first time, Kesha saw fear flicker behind the manager's eyes. Not fear of losing control, but fear of being seen for what she truly was. When a tyrant feels threatened as they return to the dining hall, Victoria whispered sharply, "Enjoy tonight. It will be your last time out here." Kesha didn't answer. She didn't need to. Strength hummed beneath her skin, the kind not born from defiance, but from self-knowing. The kind her mother had once told her, "Dignity is the one crown nobody can steal unless you hand it to them." She wasn't handing anything to anyone. She walked back into the light, ready to serve. But this time, she carried not just a tray, but the silent beginnings of a revolution. Behind her, Victoria stared at her like a storm staring at a mountain, furious that it could not move what refused to bend. And deep in Victoria's mind, a decision formed. If she couldn't push Kesha down quietly, she would destroy her, loudly, because nothing terrifies the powerful more than someone they tried to break. Who smiled instead? The evening flowed like warm honey, thick with whispers and violin melodies as soft as breath. Yet beneath the polished glamour of Silverstone, something far more profound stirred. Not in the chandeliers, not in the cutlery, but in the quiet corners of the human spirit where dignity waits to be acknowledged. Kesha walked back toward table 12, her pulse calm despite the storm she had just weathered. And as she approached, she saw it again. The moment that had anchored her heart earlier, Arthur Hartwell watching the room, not lost but alive. He spotted her first, and his face lit, not out of politeness, not out of luxury habit, but out of recognition, out of the relief that someone had finally reached him across a lifetime of muffled conversations and smiling facades. Kesha smiled gently, signed fluidly, "Food is on the way, sir. Would you care for anything else?" Arthur chuckled silently, hands moving with graceful humor. "Yes, a new grandson who pays attention." She bit back a laugh, covering her lips politely. Ethan, who had been staring at his phone, looked up curious. "What did he say?" he asked. Kesha glanced between them, deciding whether to break confidentiality or honor the private bond forming between her and Arthur. Arthur made the decision for her. He signed sharply at Ethan. "I said you're handsome but oblivious," Kesha translated, gently edited but still honest. He said you look thoughtful tonight. Arthur shot her a look, mock offense mixed with gratitude. Ethan raised a brow, amused but not fully understanding what he was missing. For the first time, Ethan realized something unsettling. His grandfather's silence did not mean absence. It meant others simply failed to meet him where he lived. A conversation. Without noise, Kesha placed a delicate plate of appetizers before Arthur and pulled out a laminated visual menu she had prepared instinctively, a habit from caring for her sister. Arthur touched the pictures, eyes softening. "You made this?" She nodded. "For my sister originally. She struggles with certain food terms. It helps her. Veal included." Arthur swallowed, slowly, deeply. For a man who built empires, this tiny act of love, of care, of dignity, moved him more than any business victory ever had. He signed, "You carry a gentle power." Kesha froze. Words like that hit tender places, places life rarely allowed to be soft, she replied quietly. Power is surviving softly in a hard world. Their eyes held a moment of shared history. Neither spoke aloud, decades apart yet bound by the same truth. Silence can be a punishment, but sometimes it becomes a shield. The sister who shaped the warrior Ethan found himself leaning forward, truly looking at his grandfather and this waitress, this woman who somehow bridged a chasm wealth had failed to fill. "How old is your sister?" he asked gently. Kesha blinked, surprised he cared. 17, deaf, he asked carefully. "Since birth," she answered. "She's brilliant, imaginative, stubborn, and the loudest person I know." She smiled. Arthur laughed silently, eyes shining. He signed, "Love makes warriors, doesn't it?" Kesha nodded, voice barely above a breath. "It made me one." Ethan heard the pain inside those words, layered, lived in. He felt discomfort, not at her, but at himself, at the truth he had ignored in his own blood, his own home. For years, rich people weren't always cruel, but they were often distracted by privilege, and in distraction, compassion dies quietly. When silence teaches, Arthur touched his wineglass thoughtfully and signed toward Ethan with intensity. "She didn't need noise to see me." Ethan inhaled sharply. The sentence hit deeper than he expected. Kesha stayed respectful, present, letting them speak through her when needed, silent when appropriate. Silence with her wasn't void, it was refuge. "Tell my grandson," Arthur signed mischievously, "that if he doesn't invite you to serve at every family event, I will disown him." Kesha laughed aloud, a soft, warm sound the restaurant didn't deserve. Ethan smirked. "Is he serious?" Kesha translated with a twinkle. "He said he likes the wine." Arthur's soft chuckle betrayed her translation, and Ethan caught it, and smiled genuinely. For a moment, three people from three worlds shared one emotion, belonging. Victoria watches the light. She cannot dim in the shadows near the bar. Victoria watched through narrowed eyes. Every laugh, every glance, every connection between Kesha and the Hartwell table gnawed at her like acid-eating silk. How dare she? How dare this girl command respect in a room that had always obeyed Victoria's authority? Plans began sewing themselves inside Victoria's mind, sharp threads of vengeance. She wouldn't fire Kesha yet, no. She'd break her first. Humiliation disguised as discipline. Punishments masked as protocol. Schedules designed to suffocate. The devil doesn't always roar. Sometimes she smiles while sharpening knives behind her teeth. And tonight, Victoria smiled as though she tasted the future. And it tasted like control. A moment of peace before war. The appetizer plates cleared. The entrees arrived, and with each moment, Arthur blossomed more. He wasn't simply eating. He was experiencing the world again, because someone took the time to speak to his silence. He signed gently when Kesha returned. Most people talk loudly when faced with silence. You listen to it instead. Kesha didn't speak. She placed her hand over her heart, every unshed tear shimmering behind her calm, and Arthur lifted his fingers with quiet reverence. "Your sister is blessed. So are we." For the first time in a long time, she felt seen, not for what she lacked or where she came from, but for who she was, a protector, a fighter, a heart that chose compassion over bitterness. And unbeknownst to her, she had just gained an ally far more powerful than any enemy she would face. The night was still gentle, but storms do not announce themselves. They gather in silence, and across the room, Victoria's smile sharpened, because power hates when those it underestimated begin to rise. Morning crept into the city like a tired sigh, streaking New York's skyline with pale gold. In the quiet before Silverstone opened its heavy glass doors, the staff moved through their routines with sleepy precision. Trays polished, napkins rolled, crystal glasses aligned like soldiers awaiting parade. And in the dim prep room, Kesha tied her apron with calm hands, the kind of calm learned only by those who have walked through life's fire and chosen not to burn. She still felt the warmth of last night, Arthur's laughter echoing like a hymn, Ethan's quiet shift from detached heir to humbled observer, and that rare, glowing moment where dignity didn't feel borrowed. But mornings are where dreams meet reality, and reality in places ruled by pride rarely forgives humility that refuses to bow. The announcement footsteps clicked sharply across the polished floor, the familiar rhythm of control wearing heels. Victoria Pierce entered with the cold poise of someone who believes she owns the air other people breathe, a clipboard in hand, a thin smile carved like marble. "Attention!" she called, voice crisp as frost. Staff paused. Kesha lifted her head. A shifting wind told her everything she needed to know. The war had begun. "I've made some schedule adjustments." Victoria's eyes scanned the room, but landed like a dagger on one person alone. Effective immediately. She began reading. Patrick, front floor double shift. Maria, bar, Jason, patio, Kesha. Silence stretched. Every heartbeat in the room waited. Dishwashing and morning prep. For the next 2 weeks. A collective inhale. Someone flinched. Someone else looked down. Power, when wielded cruelly, stains the air. Kesha felt the blow, not to pride but to justice. But she did not drop her gaze. She did not crumple. She stood still, as she had at gravesides, at court hearings, at every closed door. Life slammed shut. Victoria wasn't finished. "You are not to interact with VIP guests at all." Then, her voice sharpened with venom disguised as concern. "Consistency matters. Some of us must remember our place." There it was again, that sentence that reeks of centuries. And without raising her voice, Victoria had declared war, not just on Kesha's role, but on her worth. The staff's silence, everyone heard it, everyone felt it. But privilege makes cowards of many, and fear makes prisoners of the rest. So heads bowed, lips pressed shut, bodies pretended to work. Only one pair of eyes met Kesha's, Maria from the bar. Her gaze held apology, sympathy, guilt. Because when injustice happens, there are only 3 kinds of people: those who inflict it, those who suffer it, and those who witness and stay. Silent because courage costs too much. Maria opened her mouth to speak, then closed it. Silence. Again. But silence from the powerless isn't betrayal, it is survival, and Kesha understood that more than anyone. The quiet refusal to break, she stepped forward. Calm. Controlled. "Thank you for informing me," she said softly. The restraint in her voice wasn't weakness, it was strategy. Victoria wanted the trembling lip, the defensive tone, the tears that would justify removing her. Instead, she got something far more dangerous: grace under humiliation, because nothing unsettles a tyrant more than a target who refuses to collapse. Victoria's smile tightened. "Good, let's make sure we stay in our lane this time." And like a queen dismissing a servant, she turned her back. But power earned through cruelty always forgets one truth: humiliation fuels revolutions more than anger ever could. In the washroom, steam rose, water sloshed. The hum of industrial sinks choked the air. Kesha stood elbow-deep in soapy water, scrubbing plates that once held food served to titans of the city. Plates she had once carried with dignity. Now she cleaned them. By design, not by duty. A deliberate return to the shadows, not to erase her, but to contain her. Yet shame did not cling to her skin. She refused to let their ceiling become her roof. As she stacked dishes, her phone buzzed in her apron pocket. A text from Amara. "Morning, sis, good luck today. Got an A on my sketch assignment. Proud?" Kesha's chest tightened, not from pain, but love. She signed a reply in front of her camera. Their shared language, their shared world. Proud always. Never forget who you are. And something inside her clarified with razor focus. Victoria thought she was burying her, but she was watering a seed. The billionaire returns. The kitchen door swung open, Ethan Hartwell stepped inside, unexpected, polished, out of place among stainless steel and soap suds. He scanned the room, found her. Confusion tightened his brows. "What are you doing back here?" he asked. Kesha continued stacking plates. "Working my scheduled duty, sir." "This isn't what I requested." She didn't argue. She didn't complain. Her silence was her shield. Ethan exhaled slowly. A man unused to resistance from the world, suddenly meeting a force he couldn't command, with wealth alone. He pulled out his phone. "I'll fix this." Kesha's hand shot out, gentle, firm, stopping him. "No," she whispered. He froze. "I have 2 weeks left here," she said. "Let me leave with dignity." It wasn't resignation. It was control, her terms, not theirs. Ethan stared at her like someone seeing strength in a form he'd never understood, quiet, patient, strategic. "People like Victoria don't deserve your dignity," he murmured. Kesha smiled softly, eyes steady. "That's why she can't touch it." And for the first time in Ethan's privileged life, he understood there are battles money cannot fight, but character can. Victoria's mistake. Watching through the glass office wall, Victoria smirked. She saw a billionaire frustrated and thought she had won, but she hadn't learned the oldest rule of power. When someone rises without force, they rise forever, and when someone tries to bury truth, they plant it. Because on that day, in a warm kitchen lit by fluorescent lights, as soap bubbles slid across plates and injustice simmered among steam, a shift happened. A billionaire began questioning the system he benefited from. A grandfather felt protected by a stranger's kindness. A sister smiled through a phone, and a woman the world underestimated stood silent, unbroken, unbent, collecting strength like a storm gathers wind. Victoria believed she had put Kesha in her place. She had, just not the place she expected. She placed her on the path to destiny, and destiny does not forgive tyrants who stand in its way. A billionaire takes notice. Morning light spilled across Manhattan's glass towers like melted gold as the city roared awake with ambition. But inside the quiet dining room of Silverstone, there was a different kind of awakening, subtle, human, and far more dangerous to the one who thought she ruled this kingdom. Kesha wiped down the polished mahogany bar, her wrists aching from hours of dishwater, her breath slow and controlled, not defeated, only pacing herself. Battles are not won in loud moments. They are won in every silent refusal to bend. Across the restaurant, the air shifted. Soft leather shoes, confident steps, familiar presence. Ethan Hartwell walked in with purpose, hands in his pockets, expression thoughtful. Not the detached air of the night before, but a man troubled by truth he could no longer ignore. With him came something unexpected. Arthur Hartwell. The old man entered slowly, leaning on a cane, eyes sharp and searching, a hawk surveying territory. He looked smaller in daylight, more human, the weight of years and silence visible in the slouch of his shoulders. But when he spotted Kesha, that changed. His face blossomed into warmth. His spine straightened. His eyes lit like lamps in darkness. He lifted his hands. "Good morning, my friend." Kesha froze mid-wipe, surprise flickering across her face before a smile softened it. She signed back with gentle respect. "Good morning, sir. What brings you here so early?" Arthur tapped his cane twice, a gesture that meant purpose in his language of silence and time. A decision made. Overnight, Ethan approached, stopping a few feet away, close enough to speak but far enough to observe. His gaze fell on the cleaning rag in Kesha's hands, then traveled to the doorway leading to the kitchen where she'd been reassigned. Confusion and anger wrestled in his expression. "My grandfather insisted we come," Ethan explained. "He wanted breakfast here, and he specifically requested you serve us." Arthur nodded vigorously, tapping his chest as if saying, "I choose her." Kesha hesitated, "Not from fear, but principle. I don't want you to get in trouble on my account," she replied softly. Arthur's eyebrows shot up, and he wagged a finger sternly. "Respect is never trouble. Silence is. Then he made a motion, slow, deliberate, tapping his temple. "You see, people. That is rare," Ethan swallowed, hard. It wasn't just a compliment, it was a condemnation of the world, of himself. The quiet realization, slowly, Ethan spoke, words measured as if he hadn't practiced sincerity enough in life to be fluent. "I never realized," he murmured, eyes on his grandfather, "that we created a world where even in a room full of people, you were alone." Arthur looked at him, not with anger, but with a lifetime of unspoken truth. A truth that finally found a voice in someone else's hands. Kesha lowered her gaze, humility, not shame. The weight of witnessing intimacy that didn't belong to her quietly settled around her like a shawl. Sometimes dignity is stepping forward. Sometimes it is stepping back. But Arthur reached toward her, lightly touching her sleeve. Not possessive, but grounding. "Stay," he signed with gentle firmness, and Kesha understood. She wasn't intruding. She was included, a table request that breaks protocol before anything else could be said. Heels clicked sharply, like a blade on marble. Victoria, her expression stayed professional, but her eyes sparked with cold panic the moment she saw Arthur and Ethan. She plastered on a smile so tight it looked like it might crack her jaw. "Mr. Hartwell," she gushed, "welcome back. We would be happy to seat you anywhere. I'll assign Jason to you right away." Jason, a nervous young waiter polishing silver in the corner, almost dropped a fork in horror. Ethan lifted his chin. Calm, quiet authority vibrated in the air. "No," he said simply. "We want her." And in that moment, everything froze. Staff turned. Eyes widened. Time seemed to breathe in. And wait, Kesha stood perfectly still. Victoria's smile evaporated like water on hot iron. "I'm afraid she's not available for table service today," Victoria said, voice dipped in sugar but laced with steel. "I have her scheduled for—" "She's available to us," Ethan interrupted, voice edged like velvet-wrapped iron. A businessman didn't need to scream to crush an obstacle. He only needed to decide it was in his way. Victoria's eyes flicked from Ethan to Kesha, fury boiling under the surface. Kesha stepped forward, bowing her head just slightly. "Mr. Hartwell," she said softly, "I appreciate your kindness, but I cannot go against my assigned duties." Arthur, watching her, understood, and pride flickered across his face. Not the pride of a man who got his way, but of one who admired honor. Ethan looked stunned. He wasn't used to people turning down privilege. "Why?" he asked quietly. Kesha's answer was simple. A truth sharpened by years of surviving without favors, because rising with integrity stays risen. Arthur closed his eyes, overwhelmed by respect. Victoria smirked. She thought she had won again, but she didn't understand the shape of real power. Real power does not always roar. Sometimes it stands still and says, "Not like this. Not this way." An unspoken pact. Ethan exhaled slowly, humbled. "Then we'll wait," he said. "We'll return when you're serving again." Arthur nodded firmly, tapping his cane twice, agreement sealed, and before leaving, the old man gripped Kesha's hand, squeezing gently. "A promise in touch. We will return. This isn't the end." She bowed her head, heart full. "Thank you for understanding." Arthur looked directly at Victoria, eyes now sharp as broken ice. "Don't lose good people." Victoria's eyelid twitched, the tiniest crack in her control. The Hartwells walked out. Not defeated, awakening, and Kesha returned to her dishes, not demoted, but more powerful than ever, because she had earned something that cannot be bought. Respect from the powerful, and self-respect before the world. Victoria watched her, heart pounding. She could feel the ground shifting, but mistook the tremor for victory instead of warning. She was no longer fighting a waitress, she was fighting principle, and people who fight principle always lose, just not immediately. For now, Kesha washed plates, but destiny? Destiny was sharpening its blade. Night always settles differently on those who carry battles in their bones. While Manhattan glimmered like a kingdom made of stars and ambition, Kesha Johnson walked home through the soft hum of traffic and city pulse, her shoulders tired yet steady. She didn't walk like a victim returning from defeat. She walked like a soldier returning to strategy. Some wars are not won by louder voices. They're won by smarter silence. And Kesha, she knew silence like a second language. Her apartment was small but warm. Framed drawings from her sister, potted plants she tended like promises. Textbooks stacked near the window for the degree she paused, not abandoned, to raise a deaf child who deserved the world. Amara, 17, deaf, brilliant, full of fire, sat on the couch scribbling color-drenched illustrations. When she saw Kesha enter, her hands sprang into motion. "Bad day?" Kesha smiled, signing back with weary humor. "Stormy day. But storms water seeds." Amara rolled her eyes and signed dramatically, "You're too poetic." "Did someone annoy you again?" Kesha laughed softly. "Just life." Then she tapped the phone in her pocket, a gesture Amara knew well. Amara's eyes sharpened. Recording, evidence, strategy. Growing up in systems that doubted them taught both sisters a truth. When you are powerless, you document everything. Strategic calm. The next morning, Kesha arrived at Silverstone before sunrise, hair tied tight, uniform pressed, heart shielded. She placed her phone deep in her apron pocket, pressed record, and began her shift. The kitchen smelled of citrus and steel. Workers trickled in, some sympathetic, some indifferent, some relieved it wasn't them. And then she heard it. Heels. Victoria's entrance always sounded like nails tapping the lid of a coffin. "My favorite dishwasher," Victoria announced with a thin smile. "Hope you're ready to make yourself useful for a change." Kesha did not look up. She rinsed plates, water streaming steady like her breath, calm, always calm. "Bland, don't react." Victoria leaned close, voice dipped in venom. "You embarrassed me last night. But don't worry, there won't be a next time for you to make that mistake." Kesha's pulse didn't quicken. Her phone kept recording. A mind trained by hardship does not panic. It prepares. Collecting truth. Like armor days past, Kesha scrubbed, wiped, lifted, fetched, silent worker, silent strength. But every muttered insult, every targeted shift, every discriminatory jab, captured, timed, archived. She kept timestamps, took note screenshots, wrote shifts and comments in her phone memo with surgeon precision. This wasn't survival. It was documentation. Preparation for justice. And gradually, quietly, others noticed. Maria from the bar slipped her a look one afternoon and whispered, "She's going too far." Then louder, so Victoria could hear, "Need help wiping the wine glass shelves, Kesha?" Allies often begin as whispers. Loyalty often starts as guilt mixed with admiration. A private line of defense once, Ethan called her. She didn't pick up. Not because she didn't want help, but because dignity builds its own foundation first. He left a voicemail, voice low and conflicted. "I don't like what's happening to you. If you need support, call me." She saved it, not because she needed the number, but because power offered without strings is rare. When silence becomes courage, 2 days later, during a prep shift, Victoria cornered Kesha near the back exit. "I heard the Hartwells came asking for you again yesterday." She smiled, tight, sharp. "They won't be for long. Men like that get bored with charity cases." Kesha lifted a pan calmly, placing it into a rack. Victoria wanted to bruise spirit. She would only bruise her own reputation. Kesha spoke evenly, without heat. "I don't need them to defend me." Victoria smirked. "Oh, sweetheart, who do you think you are?" Kesha dried her hands, turned, met her eyes. "Someone who survives storms you would drown in." Victoria's smile cracked. Kesha walked away, tailbone straight, steps quiet but unshakable. Behind her, the recording captured every word. The quiet witnesses, people in the kitchen exchanged glances. Some lowered eyes, fear is heavy, but a few lifted chins. Dishwasher Henry muttered, "Not everyone can take what she takes." Another whispered, "She's brave." Someone else, "She's smart." A rebellion doesn't always roar. Sometimes it grows in quiet admiration, the preparation of destiny. That evening, Kesha sat at her small dining table surrounded by phone recordings, notes, screenshot logs, date-stamped incidents, New York. Workplace discrimination statutes open on her laptop. Her fingers moved in silent rhythm, methodical, precise. She was building a case, not fueled by vengeance, but by necessity. Amara watched her, eyes soft. "You okay?" She signed. Kesha nodded, signing back. "I don't fight because I want to. I fight because we must." Amara touched her hand. Silent prayer, silent pride. "You were not made to bow." A tear slipped down Kesha's cheek, not weak but holy. A tear for every barrier, every doubt, every moment life told her she wouldn't rise. She whispered into the quiet room. A vow, a prophecy. This ends soon. Not said like a wish, said like a promise, because power given to tyrants only lasts until someone remembers they deserve better. Kesha wasn't planning revenge. She was preparing accountability, and Victoria Pierce had no idea that the silence she mocked was the silence that would bury her. Evening descended on Manhattan like velvet, soft and dusky, wrapping Silverstone in its glow. Outside, chauffeurs idled near posh cars, and heels clicked across marble sidewalks as Manhattan's elite gathered for their nightly ritual of luxury and performance. Inside the restaurant, the first guests drifted in like expensive perfume, slow, graceful, sure of their place in the world. And in the kitchen, Kesha dried her hands, breath steady, posture poised. Though condemned to the back, she carried the quiet power of someone waiting for the world to catch up to her truth. On the outside, she washed dishes. On the inside, she sharpened destiny. Her phone was tucked securely in her apron, already recording, as it had been every shift since the fallout began. Every slur disguised as guidance, every "people like you," every attempt at control, all caught, time-stamped, archived. She worked, she waited, she built armor in silence. The return of the powerful, the dining room murmurs shifted, a hush rolling through like a breeze that knew its arrival mattered. Then the maître d' hurried into the kitchen, nearly breathless. "They're here." Everyone knew who they meant, the Hartwells, the dynasty, the money, the legacy. But tonight they brought something more powerful than wealth, a decision. Victoria emerged from her office the moment she heard. Her lips tightened, spine straightened. She smoothed her blazer, adjusted her hair as if she could erase her bitterness with perfection. "They came back," one waiter whispered. "They asked for the same table," another replied. "And—" The maître d' hesitated. "They specifically requested Kesha." A platter clattered in someone's hands, a fork slipped, a gasp rippled through cooks and waiters alike. Victoria froze. Her mask cracked just slightly, panic behind eyes polished with cruelty. "No," she said sharply, "absolutely not. She's assigned here. Jason will serve them." It was a decision born not from procedure, but fear. Fear that respect was shifting, fear that control was slipping, fear of being replaced by someone she once believed beneath her, and fear makes the arrogant reckless. She marched to table 12, heels slicing the air, smile fake enough to shatter if touched. At the table, respect waiting to be honored. Arthur sat at the corner seat like a seasoned king on a throne, built not of gold, but earned silence. His cane rested beside him, and beside that sat Ethan, posture firm but eyes scanning, searching for someone. A young server approached nervously. "Good evening, Mr. Hartwell. Jason will be—" Arthur lifted his hand sharply, a single gesture, the kind kings use. "No." His voice was soft but steel-lined. His eyes, when they fixed on Victoria, gleamed with clarity, sharpened by decades of watching powerful people underestimate quiet ones. He signed, firm and precise. "Where is the woman who speaks my language?" Ethan reinforced it aloud. "My grandfather has requested Kesha personally." Victoria's smile warped into a strained tightness. "Unfortunately, she's unavailable tonight." Arthur's eyes hardened, disappointment settling in like winter frost. He signed slowly, hands trembling with restrained outrage. "Unavailable or silenced?" Kesha, standing unseen at the entrance to the hall, felt her breath catch. It wasn't just support, it was recognition. Ethan leaned forward, tone calm but cutting. "Bring her." Victoria's jaw clenched. "She has responsibilities in the back." Arthur turned his head, chin lifting, and tapped his cane once, a sound that echoed through polished marble and crystal glasses like a royal decree. Then he signed, emphatically, fiercely, "We will wait," and silence spread across the room like thunder. Victoria faltered. For once, she looked small. Witnessing injustice transforms the privileged. Ethan sensed the shift, looked around the room. Diners watched, staff watched. Everyone understood something was happening. Power was realigning, not through force, but through integrity recognized. He spoke quietly to his grandfather, voice thick with realization. "All this time, you didn't need accommodation. You needed effort." Arthur's hand found his grandson's wrist, not in admonishment, but awakening. Privilege is not seeing what others carry. Ethan nodded. He didn't defend himself. He didn't justify. He accepted. Growth rarely announces itself. Sometimes it just breathes out in humility. The moment fate tests patience. Victoria marched back toward the kitchen, fury shaking her mask so violently it almost fell off. "Kesha," she hissed, grabbing the younger woman's arm, "you will stay right here. Do not move." Kesha's pulse thudded, not with fear, but with righteous anger wrapped in serenity. She did not argue. She did not plead. She simply tapped her apron pocket, where her phone recorded every word. Victoria didn't notice. Villains rarely do until it is far too late. The universe shifts for those who refuse to bend. Minutes passed. Then footsteps approached, not hurried, not timid, purposeful. Ethan Hartwell entered the kitchen, calm as a storm that knows it doesn't have to shout to devastate. His eyes found Victoria. Then they found Kesha. He didn't ask permission. He didn't wait for authority. He simply extended a hand toward her, voice steady. "It's time." And around him, silence broke like dawn across a weary horizon. Kesha wiped her hands, stepped forward and faced him, not as a servant awaiting command, but as a woman walking into the place she was always worthy of. She looked at Victoria one last time, then gently removed the woman's grip from her wrist. "No one gets to lock me in the shadows," she said, not angrily, but with grace sharpened by truth. "Not anymore." And she walked past the woman who tried to break her. Not with fire, not with fury, with dignity, the weapon tyrants cannot fight and cowards cannot wield. Towards the table, towards destiny, as she approached table 12, Arthur saw her and smiled with relief so pure it softened every line on his face. "You returned," Kesha signed back, tears pricking like stars behind her eyes. "I will always honor those who honor me." And as Silverstone watched, staff, guests, even chandeliers holding their breath, a quiet truth settled across the room like divine law. Some people rise because they refuse to kneel. Some people fall because they demand others bow. Tonight's seating arrangement wasn't about service. It was about worth, and the universe had chosen its side. The moment Kesha stepped back into the dining room, a hush rolled over Silverstone like a velvet curtain falling. Conversations stilled mid-sentence. Crystal glasses ceased clinking. Even the soft music from the grand piano seemed to hesitate, sensing a shift in the atmosphere. Kesha was no longer invisible. She wasn't just a server anymore. She was seen, and in rooms built on hierarchy. Nothing is more threatening than a person once kept in the shadows suddenly walking in the light. Arthur watched her approach, pride softening every aged line on his face. He lifted his hands in greeting, trembling not from age but emotion. "Welcome." The room didn't understand the sign, but they understood the look. Respect, connection, humanity. Kesha bowed her head slightly, not submission, but grace. "Thank you for waiting, sir," Arthur answered with a smile that could bend heaven. Ethan sat straighter, something like resolve firming in his posture. The transformation inside him wasn't loud. It was quiet recognition that real privilege isn't wealth. but the ability to stand beside the right people when others would rather look away. And then heels struck the floor like a gavel. Victoria. Her face was polished cruelty, her smile sharp enough to slice dignity in half. Yet beneath her practiced poise, her nostrils flared, a tremor ran down her wrist. "Power slipping always tastes bitter, Mr. Hartwell," she sang darkly. "May I speak with you privately?" Ethan didn't bother looking at her. "My grandfather is dining." Her painted smile stretched thin. "I insist." Arthur turned slowly toward her, fixing her with a stare sharpened by decades of boardrooms, signatures, silent power. His hands lifted with perfect clarity. "Sit and watch." Then he added, slower, deliberate, "Learn how respect looks." A stifled gasp rippled across the room. Victoria froze. Anger climbed her throat like fire, but she swallowed it barely and then stepped back. Her jaw clenched hard enough to bruise muscle. She was losing control. She felt it. The room felt it, and tyrants never break quietly. A spark. Touch's dry powder dinner service resumed, but whispers buzzed across silverware like electricity. Waiters exchanged looks, some nervous, some thrilled, one or two quietly hopeful. They weren't just watching a table, they were watching a power structure crack. Kesha poured water, hands steady. To Arthur she signed, "Are you enjoying your evening?" His response made her breath pause. "I enjoy you restoring my voice." Something inside her chest warmed, not pride, but validation. The kind life rarely grants to those who fight its hardest battles quietly. Victoria snaps. Suddenly, clang! A wine bottle slammed against the counter near the waiter station. Startled eyes jerked toward the sound. Victoria stood there, knuckles white, breath sharp. "Kesha," she hissed across the floor. "Office now!" The room tensed. Even the piano wavered. Kesha turned, polite but unbowed. "I'm attending the Hartwell table," she replied calmly. That simple truth detonated something inside Victoria. Her mask shattered. In 2 strides, she stood before Kesha, too close, too breathless, too angry to hide it any longer. "You think because one wealthy family likes you, you're untouchable." She spat in a low, venomous hiss. "I will end your career before you take a single step outside this place." A waiter gasped. A fork dropped. Ethan shot to his feet. Arthur reached for his cane, but Kesha did not flinch. Her voice didn't shake. Her eyes did not look away. "Threatening job security based on personal bias," she said softly, "in front of witnesses." Her hand slipped to her apron pocket, where her phone recorded every poisonous syllable. Victoria's face drained. You're recording me?" "No," Kesha's tone remained calm. "I'm recording myself surviving you." A quiet earthquake rolled through the room. Gasps, whispers, shock. Ethan's voice sliced the tension. "Miss Pierce, step away." But Victoria, blinded by rage, stripped of logic, made her fatal move. "You and your deaf charity cases think you can change this place." She snapped, voice louder than intended. Silence fell like a blade. Arthur's cane trembled in his hand. Ethan's fist closed. Waiters recoiled. A couple gasped aloud, and Kesha just stood there, silent, strong, unbroken, because the dignity she carried had never belonged to Victoria to take. The collapse begins. Arthur stood, slowly, painfully, like a mountain rising. His hands lifted, and his signs cut like judgment. Cruelty speaks loudest when frightened. Victoria stumbled back, suddenly aware, horrified, that the room had shifted against her. That she, not Kesha, now stood exposed under the chandelier's unforgiving glow. She tried to recover, panic scrambling her voice. It was just Ethan stepped forward. "You're finished." A simple sentence, delivered quietly, but absolute. Victoria's face twisted. Denial, anger, fear, disbelief swirling like poison in a glass. "This is my restaurant," she stammered. Arthur answered with a small, devastating smile. "Correction." It was. Her skin turned ash pale. Her grip on power crumbled, and Kesha, with the poise of someone life-trained in long wars, softly ended the moment. "I'll return to serving now." And she did. She turned away. Head high, steps calm, not triumphant, free, because victory isn't always loud. Sometimes it is simply walking away still whole, and behind her, the empire that had tried to diminish her began to fall piece by piece. Victoria's reign died not in screams, but in silence. And in that silence, the room learned something. Dignity is the loudest voice in any room. Morning light spilled across the marble foyer of Silverstone, like truth creeping into a room long ruled by shadows. Overnight, rumors spread through staff group chats and whispered phone calls. Did you see what happened? Victoria lost it, in front of everyone. But gossip was only the spark. Today would be the fire. Kesha arrived early, as she always did. Not to submit, but to finish what she started with dignity. She walked through the kitchen door, chin lifted, heart steady. The staff watched her. Not like before, not with pity or confusion, but with respect. Some nodded. Some gave small smiles. One young dishwasher whispered, awestruck, "Yo." She really didn't back down. Respect earned quietly is the most powerful kind. Summoned, as she tied her apron, the maitre d' approached. "Kesha, Miss Pierce wants you in her office." It wasn't a threat anymore. It sounded like a formality before execution. Like a queen forced to meet her conqueror, Kesha only nodded. "Thank you." She tucked her phone into her pocket, recording already running, and walked to the office she had been summoned to so many times before. Once as a worker, now as a witness. Inside the office, Victoria stood behind her desk like a crumbling statue, composed on the surface, panic burning behind her eyes. Her lipstick was perfect, her blazer pressed, yet control trembled in her hands, invisible to everyone except someone who had survived people like her. Beside her sat the restaurant's owner, Mr. Adler, an older man with silver hair and tired eyes. His expression was unreadable. Ethan Hartwell leaned against the wall, arms folded, impassive. Arthur sat quietly in a corner, cane resting against his leg. Watching with eyes sharp as sharpened flint, Victoria inhaled, steadying herself. "Kesha," she began, strained sweetness dripping from her voice. "It seems there was a misunderstanding last night. I would like to discuss this calmly." Kesha didn't answer. "Not yet." Mr. Adler cleared his throat. "Miss Johnson, we've received concerns about workplace tension. We'd like to hear your perspective." The air tasted like stale fear and rich perfume. The moment truth stepped forward. Kesha placed her phone on the desk, screen facing up. "Of course," she said softly. "I came prepared." Ethan's eyebrow lifted in quiet approval. Victoria's throat bobbed. She felt the ground shift beneath her feet. Kesha tapped the device. Audio filled the room. Cold. Sharp, undeniable. "You will stay right here. Do not move. Do you think one wealthy family liking you makes you special? I will end your career. You and your deaf charity cases." Silence fell, heavy, suffocating. Not a single breath dared move. Victoria's face drained of color. Mr. Adler's jaw dropped in horror. Ethan's gaze hardened like steel tempered in fire. Arthur blinked slowly, a silent verdict etched into his gaze. Kesha let the last words echo into stillness. Then she spoke. Quiet, steady, powerful. "I did not come here to attack anyone. I only wanted to work and support my sister. But dignity is not negotiable. Not for me, not for her." Her voice didn't shake. "It carved the fall, mister." Adler stood, voice shaking with controlled fury. "Victoria Pierce, effective immediately." Victoria panicked. "Wait, you are terminated, and we will initiate a formal HR and legal review regarding workplace discrimination." This isn't fair. You don't understand." "Enough," Ethan cut in, calm, lethal. "I saw plenty." Arthur tapped his cane firmly, signing, "Consequences are the language bullies never expect to hear." Victoria's mask finally shattered. The cruelty she hid under professionalism spilled through shaking lips. She is nothing, a dishwasher pretending to be important. This place isn't for... She didn't finish, because in that moment she realized no one was listening anymore. She had become irrelevant, and irrelevance is the death of tyrants. Security arrived. Victoria stepped back, then stepped down, not loudly, not dramatically, just gone. The woman who fed on humiliation now tasted her own. A path opens. Silence settled again, not tense, but stunned. Mr. Adler turned to Kesha, voice humbled. "Miss Johnson, I'm deeply sorry. I failed to see what was happening. You showed strength and patience most people never could." Kesha nodded, accepting but not reveling. Her dignity never needed victory to survive. Ethan stepped forward. "If you're willing," he said, voice respectful, "I'd like to offer you a role with us. My grandfather and I are building a corporate accessibility and inclusion division. You'd be perfect." Arthur smiled, heart full, proud, speaking through hands. "Not help, partnership." Kesha blinked, tears warming her eyes but refusing to fall. "I need 2 weeks to transition," she whispered. "I don't want to leave anyone here overwhelmed." Everyone stared, not just at her strength, at her character. The walk back to the dining room, as she stepped out of the office, whispers swirled, then hushed. Employees watched her not with pity, but reverence. Maria from the bar pressed a hand to her heart. The busboy nodded, like a soldier saluting a commander. Even the new hires sensed something remarkable had happened. Kesha's chin lifted as she walked, not above anyone, but beyond what tried to keep her small. She reached the kitchen door and paused. Her phone stopped recording. The war was over. Justice wasn't loud. It wasn't violent. It wasn't dramatic. It was earned in silence and delivered in truth. And Victoria, she wasn't the villain anymore. She was the lesson. 6 months later, the world was different. Not because it dramatically transformed overnight, but because small truths, once whispered and hidden, now walked proudly in daylight. Silverstone, unchanged in marble and chandeliers, was utterly transformed in spirit. Gone were the tense glances of employees bracing for cruelty. Gone were the tight smiles masking fear. Instead, laughter occasionally floated from the kitchen. Waiters exchanged real eye contact. A quiet dignity filled the air, not loud or flashy, just free. Some guests still came expecting arrogance, served alongside oysters, but they found something else, a restaurant where respect was part of the menu. And in that world, Kesha was no longer there. Not because she had been pushed out, but because she had outgrown the walls that tried to shrink her. A new role, a new beginning on the 47th floor of the Hartwell Enterprises building, glass walls reflecting the wide-stretching city below. Kesha walked confidently toward her new office. Director of Accessibility and Inclusion Initiatives. Her badge gleamed. Kesha Johnson, Community Leadership Division. Beside her office door hung a small framed card written in elegant lettering. True equity isn't charity. It is recognizing value before others dare to see it. D. Arthur Hartwell inside, 2 interns reviewed outreach proposals. A digital board displayed upcoming programs, ASL training workshops, 215 participants enrolled deaf hiring partnership, 37 new positions created discrimination reporting, hotline launched scholarship fund, 7 recipients confirmed. Every line represented someone gaining access to a door once locked. Kesha didn't just open doors, she removed hinges, family found and chosen. That afternoon, she visited a modest art studio across town. Paint-splattered tables, sunlight streaming in, canvases leaning against every wall. There, Amara sat surrounded by classmates, fingers flying with laughter in sign language. Her tablet displayed a new project, a children's book teaching ASL to hearing kids. When she spotted her sister, Amara signed dramatically, "You're late! Are you saving the world again?" Kesha laughed, "Trying. Are you dominating the art universe?" Amara waved at her professor, who approached with pride in his eyes. "She's brilliant," he signed and spoke. "A scholarship winner and one of our best." Kesha's chest tightened with joy so deep it almost hurt. All the years of washing dishes, graveyard shifts, lost sleep, paperwork battles, they had led here. Her sister didn't just survive, she soared. a different ending for those who harmed themselves. Meanwhile, across the river, in a small dim cafe in Queens, a woman in a wrinkled uniform slammed steaming mugs onto tables. Victoria Pierce. Once polished, feared, admired for all the wrong reasons, now invisible to the very world she had worshipped. Her manager, half her age, waved a hand impatiently. "Victoria, table 4 is waiting. Don't make them ask twice." People looked through her, not at her. The irony was brutal. She had once believed she could define worth by title and uniform. Now she had neither, just regret and a name that Google punished. And sometimes, when she checked her phone, she saw articles praising Kesha's programs, videos of Amara signing confidently on stage, brochures of a hospitality industry changing its language, literally and figuratively. She would turn the screen off quickly, claiming she didn't care, but she always watched and always remembered. Cruelty ages fast. Integrity never wrinkles. A night to remember. 1 year after the confrontation, the Hartwell Foundation hosted its first National Inclusion Gala at the Grand Hall of the Hartwell Hotel. Crystal chandeliers sparkled like hope multiplied. 1,000 people filled the ballroom, CEOs, activists, artists, interpreters, community advocates, and at the center of the stage stood Kesha, elegant in a deep emerald gown, posture tall, heart full. Lights dimmed, silence fell. A spotlight warmed her face. She signed and spoke. Everyone deserves to be heard, not when they fight for it, but simply because they exist. Arthur Hartwell, seated proudly at the front, clapped with fierce pride. Ethan nodded with genuine respect. Amara, camera ready, beamed like a star about to burst from happiness. The applause rose, long, thunderous, heartfelt. People didn't just admire her, they believed in her. The reception line. After the speech, a woman approached, younger, nervous, in a server's uniform. She swallowed, voice trembling. "Miss Johnson, I just wanted to say, I'm like you. I thought maybe people like us could never get here." Kesha took her hands, looked her in the eyes, fully, intentionally, lovingly. "People like us?" She smiled gently. "There is no us and them. There are only people who walk through fire, and those still learning they can survive it." The young woman's eyes watered. Hope is heavy when you've been starving for it. Kesha squeezed her hand. "You belong here. Never forget that." The final truth. As the night ended, Kesha walked to a quiet balcony overlooking the city lights. Cool wind brushed against her skin. The hum of celebration faded behind her. She breathed deep, not out of exhaustion, but gratitude. Not long ago, she stood in a kitchen, scrubbing plates, surviving humiliation silently. Now she stood above the skyline, not because someone lifted her, but because she refused to kneel long enough to forget she could stand. She whispered into the night, a prayer, a promise, a truth carved by struggle. Dignity rises, always, and the city whispered back as if the universe agreed. The underestimated become unstoppable. Fade out, not the end, but a legacy beginning.